Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Big Time Strength Podcast. I am your host, Amanda Berg. This week, I'm excited to bring you my first guest, an amazing coach, and my good friend, Coach Jessica Gust. She is the head strength and conditioning coach at St. Louis Park High School in my home state of Minnesota. Before that, let's take a little bit of time to hear about our great sponsors. TeamBuildr. Thank you, TeamBuildr, for sponsoring today's episode. TeamBuildr is the leading software for high schools and colleges by providing coaches the ability to write programs online, generate over 13 reports, and even train athletes remotely for side income. Right now, if you sign up with the code BIGTIME, you will receive a free APRE programming template, which works automatically within TeamBuildr. No more spreadsheets and workout cards to track training maxes that change day by day. Automate your programming without outsourcing your program with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr has been wonderful for us. I'm so grateful for them, especially during COVID. Their templates, and I've been so impressed with TeamBuildr, so I'm so glad that they are sponsors. Next, Powerlift. Powerlift is the leading manufacturer and distributor of heavy-duty strength training equipment for collegiate and high school athletic performance centers around the world. Powerlift brings over 20 years of experience to the strength and conditioning world. All products are manufactured in their state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Jefferson, Iowa. Powerlift is proud to support all coaches, making it the big time where they are at. For more information, contact Mike Richardson at mrichardson@powerlift.com. Our third sponsor, Progressive Speed System from Evans Sports Performance. Are you a strength and conditioning coach who struggles in the area of speed development? Do you wish you had a system to teach acceleration and multi-directional speed like the system you use in the weight room? Do you know a lot of speed and agility drills but don't really know what the drills are supposed to be teaching your athletes? If you would like a system that allows you to plug in your favorite drills in a progressive way to allow you to slowly prepare your athletes to move better on the field or court, head over to evansportsperformance.com and type in BTS50 for $50 off the Progressive Speed System. This has been a game changer for our program. This year, we started using it this summer after students were returning back from COVID. And I can't say enough of a great job how they do from starting them just teaching, and they're doing it right. They lay it out so easy that coaches are able to follow it. So head on over to Evans Sports Performance. Now, let's get to the show. My guest, my strength and conditioning bestie, Coach Jessica Gust, has been the head strength and conditioning coach at St. Louis Park High School for 10 years. She's been a biology and exercise science teacher for 16 years. And get this, the Assistant Synchronized Swimming Coach for the past 21 years. And she was also a synchro athlete and was introduced to the weight room through this sport. She holds a master's degree in applied kinesiology and numerous certifications in the area of strength and conditioning and coaching. Coach Gust is our current Minnesota National High School Strength Coaches Association State Coach of the Year, and I'm excited for you to hear her story. Welcome, Jessica!
Thank you.
Before we get started, I thought it'd be good to tell the story of us a little bit. Jessica and I, we literally live 40 minutes apart. We're in schools that are 40 minutes apart in Minnesota here. And we met for the first time in Georgia. Went to Georgia to the High School Strength Coaches Association and at the conference. And I think she came and she sat down with me at lunch. Was it lunch that we first met?
Yep, and I think so.
We started talking. We learned that she's from Minnesota. I'm like, I'm from Minnesota. So we really connected that day, kind of got to know each other, went back home. I stalked her on social media for a little bit and learned just the great things that she was doing. And I could tell instantly the thing that really stood out to me was just how smart she was in the area of science. So I really started just kind of following things that she was doing in that area. And we met up again at a Minnesota conference and started talking a little bit more, like, oh, got to know each other. And then I think the deal for us was we went out to Indiana road tripping, right?
Big adventure. Big adventure.
I was going to, I'm like, I'm driving out to Indiana to go to a conference, and is there anybody out there that wants to go with me? And Jessica's like, I'll do it. And so, well, we got the old Buick, let's go. And the story from there has been wonderful. I mean, we've been able to take a couple more trips together, and she has just really been my rock in the strength and conditioning world. So it's just truth that support is the key with this. So welcome, Jessica. I'm excited to hear your story. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll be able to see that she is in her amazing new weight room. So make sure to check that out too, because she's been doing some amazing stuff, and we'll talk about that. But all right, let's talk about St. Louis Park High School.
Awesome. So we are a first-ring suburb of Minneapolis. We're just to the west of Minneapolis, and are surrounded by relatively large districts, but our district is really contained within our city boundaries. And so that's not super typical of our area. So we're about 1,400 students surrounded by schools that are about 3,500 students, give or take. And we have a really diverse population, which is amazing. We have a lot of open enrollment kids. So we have kids coming from other surrounding cities, and it's a really, really unique hometown feel for being as close to an urban center as we are. So our school is relatively small. I know everybody missed out on being able to come up to Minnesota this year for NatCon and visit Ryan Johnson over at Wayzata. Our school is could fit in their lunchroom, I feel like, but it's a great spot. And I grew up here. Both my parents grew up here. My grandfather went to school here. So I'm a third generation Oriole, and pretty sure they won't let me leave now.
Wonderful. God, what great history. I know, just looking at your bio, so you've been teaching longer than you have been the strength and conditioning coach. Can you talk how that opportunity came up and where you're at with it?
Yeah, so I actually started coaching synchronized swimming here right after I graduated from high school. So I've been doing that the longest, and went to Hamline University in St. Paul, got my undergrad in biology and education, and came back and started teaching here in 2004. And had been coaching synchro the whole time through. And we got to a point in our district where we had a number of programs come through the weight room that were outside contracts. And our athletic director was really excited about this new company that they had hired, and was really pushing to get more and more people involved in the weight room. So he specifically came to the head coaches and said, hey, we really need your guys' support to get kids to sign up to go do this workout program in the summer. And at the same time, our synchro team had been going through a little bit of a lull relative to our success. We kind of have a dynasty program here relative to synchro, and we were really looking for what are things that other synchro programs aren't doing that we can leverage to get a leg up. And so I told my synchro girls, I said, listen, it's really important you guys go sign up for this program. You got to do it. It's going to make you a really better swimmer. And I told them, I don't know if it was idiotically or not, I was like, I'll go with you. I'll come with you. I'll be there every day. I'll do the workouts with you so you guys feel better about being there, and make sure you're comfortable, and we have a little team bonding and whatever. So I my athletic director and I actually both showed up every day to do the workouts with the kids. And I sort of befriended the guy who was running the program, and after the summer, just told him, I said, I'd love to stay on and volunteer and help coach if that's something that you would be okay with. I'm really having a great time. I love it. I'd like to learn more. And from there, just really kind of got this little spark about really figuring out that that was something that I was really passionate about. I was super lucky as an undergrad to have my advisor say to me, he's like, hey, don't feel like you have to go to grad school. At a certain point, you'll figure out what you really want to do. And that was that moment for me where I was like, now I know what I want to go to grad school for. So I applied to the University of Minnesota's program, went and did my master's in applied kinesiology, and at the same time was still working as a volunteer coach with the folks that were contracted in here. And then when that contract ran out, my athletic director was really gracious in letting me just take over control of the program. So that was 2010 would have been the first year that I was fully in charge in here. And for, the couple years before that, I was volunteering and in grad school and all that stuff. So I have a very unique path to this job compared to, I think, a lot of other folks that take what I think in this field is the stereotypical path of getting your undergrad, doing a GA, that whole piece of working your way into the profession. I just sort of inserted myself into the program and really grateful for my athletic director who believed in the ideas that I had. And, the rest is history, I guess.
Wow. We talk about, stepping up to the table, and I'm just so proud of you of how you did that. And I think your science background, I bet, brings so many advantages to this job, and doing it later on. Love it. Talk about the culture and what you've, maybe where you started out and what the culture is at St. Louis Park now with students and strength and conditioning.
Yeah, I think coming from that rollover of, I think we had 3 or 4 different programs in a span of 10 years that had rolled through and been in charge of the strength and conditioning program. And for me, one of my goals was to create a space where all athletes felt welcome, all sports, all genders, all abilities. And at the time, I don't think it was intentional. I just think it wasn't purposefully inclusive. And one of my things was I just really want to make sure that every athlete in this building knows this is a space where they are welcome to come to get better. And it took a little bit of time, and we've been through a handful of head coaches in the last 10 years that have come and gone. And each of those positions, when it rolls over, we all know this, right, comes with some different challenges in having to navigate the beliefs of the head coach and what their belief in the strength and conditioning program should look like. And then me trying to make sure that I stand up for what I believe this program is about. And I think over that time, we've really developed a space where I've got kids from all sports represented in here. It does not feel like a football dominated space, and there's nothing wrong with football at all. I love our football guys, but I do think that it can easily be perceived that the weight room is a football space. And so to really continue to work towards, like, we're all Orioles here and we're all here to get better. And when I talk about team, right, we're talking about our team in the weight room. We're not talking necessarily about a sports specific team, right? We're talking about improvement of all of our sports. So this year, because of COVID, is the first time that I've actually sorted kids into groups by team for off-season training. Typically, I just open up time slots and kids can sign up for whichever time works best for them. And this year we've got it divided kind of by teams, which is a little bit different feel. I like it for some reasons, and I don't love it for other reasons, but that's the world we're living in right now. And I think it's really beautiful to see so many of our teams represented, and teams that, traditionally here haven't really felt like the weight room was a space for them. So great example is our boys swimmers, right? And I love those guys. They're great. Having a swimming background, I think, makes it easy for me to connect with some of those teams that feel like they're not necessarily like the big three and all of that. So the kids are great in terms of working across sports. And one of the other reasons that I never grouped them by sport before is because we have so many kids that are 2 and 3 sport athletes. Because we're such a small school, we've got a lot of kids that are 2 and 3 sport athletes and represent multiple teams. So I don't want them to feel like we're prioritizing one team over the other.
Okay. I remember you last year celebrating your winter in that you had 100% buy-in and all the teams were lifting. And as far as your sports and us here in Minnesota, I think, specifically you have cross-country skiing and just this diverse sports. What are some strategies that you did as far as getting those coaches to buy into, strength and conditioning for sports that typically maybe wouldn't use it as their training?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm really fortunate to have is a lot of the kids are in my class during the school day. So I teach typically biology. I teach an exercise science class. I teach sometimes environmental science, which is not my favorite, but it's ninth graders, which means I get to see those ninth graders as they're coming into the school and kind of get them engaged early. The last year I didn't have any ninth graders, but the 11th graders that I had as ninth graders. And we talk all the time about the value of all of the different aspects of physical training, specifically when we're talking in our exercise science class about like different energy systems and all of that. And I'm able to educate the kids, and the kids actually go to the coaches and say, well, coach, we're going to lift, right? So the Nordic skiers, last year was my first year that I had the Nordic ski team in, and that was really a function of the leaders of that team asking the coaches to make those arrangements. And I give those kids a ton of credit because they really bought in. They wanted to come in the morning, they're showing up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning as a team and just crushing it. And a lot of those kids, I think, really felt the benefit of taking advantage of that. So for me, I like to just be able to educate the kids, and if the coaches are resistant, like I do all the obvious things like emailing the coaches, say, hey coach, I'd love to have your team in the weight room, all that stuff. But having those kids have the knowledge base of how important it is for them, they can also go to the coaches and say, we really want to set up times to lift in season with Coach Gust. So that's one of the things for me in my unique position that I've been able to get the kids educated to a point where they feel the importance and then they feel the urgency, and they're the ones that really convince the coaches that they want to do it.
Wonderful. Yeah, that just goes to show somebody new coming into this industry, asking, how can I get into high school strength and conditioning? We cannot say it enough, like, be a teacher,
Yep.
The relationships that you can build as a teacher. I know you have it in science. I'm a physical education teacher, and the same thing. I have all the ninth grade classes, and some could look at that as like, I got the ninth graders. I love it. I have every single ninth grader. I know who every single student is by the time that they are sophomores, and have developed a relationship with them. So it is key. We cannot say it enough. Like, that teaching degree or getting into the schools as a substitute is just a game changer with developing those relationships and turning those relationships into your leaders. So
yeah, it's huge. I don't know how people that aren't teachers, like if you don't work in the building, I feel like I would have such a hard time doing this job if I didn't work in the building.
mm-hmm.
I think there would be a huge amount of challenges related to building those relationships with the coaches and with the kids that would make your job so much harder. So I think actually being in the building makes your job infinitely easier.
Yeah, you can't, that relationship piece related to teaching is just something you can't, get in a different area. So great. Well, I'd like to transition to that beautiful orange and black facility you have behind you. It's been fun because I was able to meet you right when you got approved for this process, and was able to see some of your drawings of your old facility and watch you with your blueprints and just turn this into the amazing place that it is today. So Maybe talk a little bit about the path, and then a little bit of advice and questions to ask. Talk to us about that place.
Sure. So our building here is landlocked, so we don't have a lot of space to add on. And our old weight room was in the sub-basement, in the basement of the basement. And you had to go down this like treacherous staircase to get down there. It was really not the safest option for a weight room, but I love it because that's where I grew up lifting. And, you know, I go down there and it still smells exactly the same as it did 25 years ago. But it was in the sub-basement. And then when they added on our current field house, which is just behind this wall here, there was this really strange leftover space in between where the existing building stopped and where the new building was. And it was this like 8-sided room with 4 different levels of ceilings. And they moved the weight room in like 2001. They moved the weight room from the basement up into this really weird room on the first floor, which is safer, but it was really not ideal for a weight room space because the ceilings weren't tall enough. There weren't enough like straight walls. I rearranged that room every single year trying to find the best answer for how to organize our equipment in there. We had a lot of space limitations. I think we were at maybe 1,100 square feet in that room, maybe, and still serving the same number of kids. So my athletic director had been nudging for a long, long time that we needed a new weight room. And our previous superintendent, his name is Rob Metz. He was actually our principal here at the high school before he moved to be superintendent. He was the superintendent at the time that this went through, and he was a really big advocate for sports. And so I'm really grateful to him. But we were going out for a referendum, and everyone across the district was allowed to submit requests for money for the referendum. And our athletic director put the weight room on the list. He said, we need a new weight room. And anybody who's been through this process knows it's like such a long game. Like that process takes forever. And every time the school board would meet, they would whittle down the list. And I'd get a call from the ADs saying, we're still on the list. And then a month later, they'd have another meeting and shrink the list a little bit more. And, oh, we're still on the list. And we got down to kind of the last couple months of the process and we were still on the list, and we both started getting really excited about it. And I remember him saying to me, like, okay, this is the last one. Like, we have to make it through this meeting and then you get your new weight room. And I was just like beyond excited at that point that we'd even made it that far. But they kept us on the list, along with, you know, other big projects like a new auditorium at the middle school and all these other things that I don't really care about. But we made it through the meeting. We got to stay on the list. And the next day, like literally the next day after they finalized that list, my athletic director and I were in meetings, and he said, we're going to be the first ones ready with our plans. We're going to be the first ones so that you get to be in the first round of the construction. And by that point, I had already kind of been dreaming a little bit about what I wanted it to look like. And ultimately, I came down to 3 things. I wanted a square room with high ceilings because of the weird space that I had been in, right? I wanted turf in the middle, and I wanted more storage because my old room had no storage. So we started meeting with the architects. It was great. They were really awesome. And we just blasted through that process because we had really, really clear ideas of exactly what we wanted, and walked into the very first meeting with a plan that said, this is what we want. And the architects were sort of like, oh, well, all right, then I guess you've made some decisions already. And so we were able to get in the first round, and this room opened 2 weeks before we got sent home from COVID. But that whole process, the referendum was passed three years ago. So it's been a long time. But one of the things that I think is super important in this process is reaching out to people who have done it before. So I went on to our NHS SCA Facebook group, and I asked just a couple questions. And I would encourage anybody who's getting a new space, building a new space, remodeling a space, to ask people these same questions. So what did you do that you wish you would have done differently? What did you do that you love and for sure would do again? And what didn't you do that you now wish you had done? And I put those questions out to our Facebook group, and as usual, everybody in that Facebook group is so great. I had answers filling up the page within the hour. So got really, really good recommendations from people who had been through this process before, and was able to incorporate those suggestions into our plan so that we don't repeat mistakes that people already know are not a great idea. And it's super fortunate to have Ryan Johnson over in Wayzata, who'd been through this process relatively recently. And if you look at this room and you look at his room, there's a lot of similarities over there, because we actually traveled around and visited a whole bunch of schools, high schools and small colleges in our area that had done new weight rooms in the last like 5 or so years, and visited them, wrote down a lot of ideas of things that we liked about them. Definitely some things that we looked at that we were like, ooh, I don't think I like that. But we were able to then go into the architects with a really clear vision of what we wanted.
Okay. Wow. Great questions to ask. And on your end, what, having gone through this process from there, what did you learn that you ended up adding into your weight room? What were some of the key things?
So key things were storage, acoustics, and what was my third one? Storage, acoustics. There was one more, but I know RJ had specifically said, if you're going to have a big cement room, the acoustics are going to be terrible. So you need to address that. Storage was my third one.
That was the first one.
Oh, that was the first one. Well, then I still don't remember what my third one is.
That's right.
So, was able to go to the architects and say, we need some way to control the acoustics because it's going to be loud. We needed, the floor. The floor was the third one.
Yep.
And so I was able to tell them these 3 things. And interestingly, 2 of them have ended up, actually all 3 now have ended up not working out the way that I had hoped they would, which goes to my last suggestion about this process, which is be as specific as you can. And it's just as important to tell them what you don't want as it is to tell them what you do want, because you're dealing with people that don't know your field. So the floor that we ended up with in here is already lifting. It's already coming up off the floor, because the floor that the architects chose to put in here is not meant for large spaces. And so it's a floating rubber floor. And because we have so much equipment in here, and because the humidity here in Minnesota is so delightful, anytime the weather changes, all of the seams pop. So that is something that I thought I was clear with the architects about what exactly we needed to have in here. But ultimately, when it came to the bidding process, they went with the cheapest bid, which is what we ended up with, and not working out the way that it needs to. So that's something we're in the process of working with the construction company to help get that resolved so that we don't have that issue anymore. But that's something that, ultimately I thought I made clear, and I don't know where the mistake happened, but now we're dealing with this beautiful new room with a floor that has seams that separate. And so make sure that you tell people, if there's stuff that's not what you want, tell them that too, right? Because at least then you can come back and say, I told you this isn't what I want. And ultimately, that's the biggest issue we've run into. The acoustic tiling that we were supposed to end up with got thrown out because they thought it was going to be too expensive. So they took it out of the bid. And then I'm in a custody battle with my storage room because they put roof access in my storage room. And now they're saying that I can't use it as storage because it has roof access, and they don't want to give me a key to a room that has roof access. So we're still trying to settle that battle.
Okay. Always those little things. That's a great one to make sure to have our custodial staff on your side, I would say, as far as relationships, just with all those.
Yeah, and it's not our custodial staff. Actually, our custodial staff is amazing. It's coming from further up the chain. So
yeah, wow,
it's fascinating. The politics are fascinating.
I know we've been, obviously dealing with COVID through this and that you have had athletes in there, but what do
Mhm.
you envision when you get that full room like you plan? What'll be the biggest difference from your previous room to now this great space?
Yeah, we used to overflow out of our weight room into the hallway. So when I would have the football team come in and lift, I'd have stations in the hallway, and the kids would have to rotate through the weight room out into the hallway and then back through to get all their lifts in, just because the square footage was way too small. And now we've got plenty of space, plenty of room for kids. The biggest thing I wanted was for kids to feel like they weren't crowded, like all of those things. I think for some kids are things that push them away from being in the weight room, like, oh, it's too crowded, I don't want to go in there and I have to be bumping around with other people and I'm not comfortable and all that stuff. So I really wanted it to be big and open, and so that we can have multiple groups in here at a time and everybody feels like they have plenty of room. And to free up my programming in a way that now I actually have 10 of everything. Like I used to have to program around, okay, we have 3 trap bars and 2 platforms and 6 racks and 4 curl bars and 2 sets of dumbbells and all this and to make it so that my programming was not limited by the equipment that we had. So ultimately, once we can go back to having more kids in the weight room, I've got 10 racks, 10 platforms in the turf, so I can easily run, depending on how I program it, between 40 and 80 kids at a time in here. And that for me is going to make it more efficient. It's going to make it easier for teams to roll in and out. It's going to make it easier for head coaches to feel comfortable, like, I'm not impeding on their practice time as much, or having to make specific demands about, well, you can come in at this time because, hockey comes in at this time and all this. And so to really free up the scheduling and the programming so that we can do the best job we can for our kids here.
Wonderful. Gosh, I'm so excited. I'm excited to see those pictures coming out with just kids filling the room and you running those great systems like you do. So it'll
Well,
be.
and the other thing too with COVID is if we had to be in our old room, we wouldn't have been able to practice inside, because I would have only been able to put 6 kids in there at a time because of how weird the space was. Now I can put a kid at each rack, and then I've divided the turf into 9 spaces, so I can run 18 kids in here at a time with a ton of social distancing space. And it's been a lifesaver for this time, because we wouldn't have been able to be inside if we didn't have this new space.
Yeah, that's a real positive way to look at it. So you kind of get all those little kinks out before it turns into a stressful situation where you just have to go and you have to have kids in. So I'm glad you're able to find that out. Well, transitioning here, my mission for coming on to the Big Time Strength podcast was to introduce amazing female coaches to the world. And I kind of want to ask you, Jessica, what do you think is unique about being a female coach in this field right now and where we're at?
Yeah, man, I've been coaching for a long time before I started coaching in the weight room, but synchro is a unique sport in that it's maybe one of the only sports that is nearly 100% females, from coaches to officials to athletes. Everyone involved is a female. So I tell people all the time, I never ever experienced what sexism was like in coaching until I started working in the weight room.
Wow.
And I just remember being so shocked that, like, at how real it really was, and the interesting dynamics that you end up having to deal with. I've definitely had some experiences with head coaches where I really feel like if I had said to them, like, if I was a man, would you ask me that exact same question, or would you ask me that question in the same way that you just asked me? And I think that whether intentional or not, I think that there are definitely some preconceptions that some folks have about the capabilities of women being able to do this job. And I got smacked in the face by some of those very early on in my job here. And I just remember going home some days and being like, whoa, I don't know if I'm cut out to handle this situation. Like, this is mind blowing to me that this exists still. And on the flip side of that, I have amazing head coaches that are super supportive, and I've never, ever, ever, felt like I needed to work harder to explain to people that I know how to do my job. But you definitely run into some folks that my favorite is the look up and down, right? When you meet somebody new, and I don't feel this necessarily from people in our field, right? But from people outside of our field, when you tell them what your job is and you're like, hi, I'm Jessica, I teach science and I'm the strength and conditioning coach. And they do the like once over, like look up and down and then go, oh, that's interesting, which is a very Minnesotan way of saying like, what are you talking about, right? So I do think that probably like most fields, we have to work a little bit harder to convince people that we know what we're doing. And we have to work a little bit harder to convince people that we're capable of coaching boys and men in the same or better way than guys can coach them. Like, I think that all of that is so dependent on the coach's personality and so much less on their gender that it's interesting to me that we still have to have that discussion about capabilities. What are your capabilities in your job? And ultimately, when I run into those people now, I say, well, lucky for me, you're not my boss. Like, my boss trusts me to do my job. So good for me that you're not him.
Yes. And I mean, I'll say it over and over. With Title IX in effect, we have 50% female athletes and 50% male athletes, right? And we need to find a way to get coaches in front of all aspects so our coaches also represent that front. So
yeah. And I do think there's and this is not something that I have experience with, but I'm sure you have, is that so many women in the field of coaching end up leaving, and this is not specific to strength and conditioning, but I think it applies. They end up leaving their coaching positions for other things that they feel like they need to prioritize, like managing their family and having babies and all of those things. And I see it over and over again that women feel like they have to give up their coaching jobs in order to take care of other responsibilities. And I'm not judging them for it. I wish there was a better way to retain those people because they're good coaches, right? Like, how can we do a better job of retaining females in the field and feeling like the field is supportive of them doing all of these other things? And also, we want you to keep coaching because you're a good role model, So I've seen that play out with a lot of my friends, and having no kids myself makes it easier, because, and that's one of the reasons that I don't have kids, is because I know that if I were to have kids of my own, that I would have to give up some things. And if you're a teacher, that your coaching salary isn't what pays the bills, right?
yeah.
So when it comes down to it, what are you going to give up? You're going to give up the thing where you make the least amount of money and takes up the most of your time.
Yeah. And I think our reality is, even if we do not leave the coaching industry, we go on maternity leave, right? So you kind of, if you're a male coach, ask yourself that. Could you walk away from your job for, either up from 6 weeks up to 3 months and come back? And, there's a lot that goes in as far as managing with that. And sometimes just that give and take, you usually end up with the give. And that's been a hard part. So those are definitely some things to keep addressing and to just keep bringing it out into the open and talk about it. How can we do this and how can we make it work? So you just have a great perspective on that. I want to switch to my favorite subject. My favorite subject with you, probably 95% of our conversation. Professional development resources. I know you're a big reader. I think just about every book that we talk about, we're like, oh, have you read it? I've read it. And you've read everything that I say, almost all of it all the time. So I want to hear about your professional development and just.
Yeah, I think most recently, I have been, when we got sent home from COVID, Play put together the coaching nexus, and Coach Schofield and Jeremy Boone were on there, and it was such a fun time to be able to go on there and talk with other coaches and listen to how they're handling it, and to get perspectives of, because everybody was so different, like from up here, we got to talk to the guys in North Carolina, guys down south and all over the place, and hear what they were doing to handle it and just share ideas. And for me, that was like a lifesaver during that time, because being stuck at home, it was an opportunity to get to see people's faces and just like give and take so many resources. So I found that hugely valuable, and also to be able to actually connect kind of one-on-one with some folks that, maybe you've met before, but you never really had a chance to talk to. And so really the coaching nexus this spring has been awesome. And signed up for Jeremy Boone's Winning Leader Academy, which is mind-blowing. If you have the opportunity to get on there, you got to do it. It is going to turn your perspective right on its head in the best way possible, and challenge you to step up your game in the way that is going to really benefit your kids the most. And so Winning Leader Academy has been, I would have paid 4 times what it costs to do that. So if you have an opportunity to do Winning Leader Academy, please sign up. Jeremy's amazing, and one of those people that you kind of, like every time they start talking, you're like, I can't miss it, because something really good is going to come out of his mouth, and I'm not going to want to miss what he's saying. So there's just so much there, and really guides you through a great process of doing a deep dive into why you do the things you do, what can you change, is it the best way? And in no way does he say like what you're doing is bad, but he's saying, how can we step it up? Right. Like, and he's just so supportive, and the people in there are all there to really, challenge themselves, which is a great environment to be in. Right. That's kind of like going back to being an athlete. I miss that sort of, supportive competition, in that, like, we're all there to do the same thing. So I don't want to let anybody down by slacking. And so it's been great. Pairs you up with accountability partners, and you get to have some really good quality time exchanging ideas with people. So I love that. I've been using a ton of Gary Schofield stuff off the Play Pro app. His linear speed and agility, change of direction stuff has been great. And with us having to split our kids between inside and outside, I've loved working through the progressions that he provides on there. And those are really easy to digest videos and super clear. So I love that. And then ultimately I'm just kind of a book nerd, and, like, I'm not going to say I'm sad that we got sent home, because it gave me more time to read at home. And as an introvert, it's like, you want me to stay home? All right, I'll stay home. Just gives me more time to kind of stick my nose in books and suck up a bunch of knowledge.
Okay. What is one during COVID that you've really been diving into?
I really like Changemaker by John Berardi. He is the founder of Precision Nutrition, and he wrote this book Changemaker as sort of it's almost like a professional guide. Like, it walks you through kind of the different aspects of your professional career, and how you can best leverage your behaviors to incite change in others. And it's a kind of a fat book, but the inside, the graphic design of it in there is kind of cool. It's almost like reading a kid's book, because it's got a bunch of colors and cool fonts. And I worked through that one pretty fast. I like that one a lot. I read, like, I can't remember if it was The Winter, but Range by David Epstein. and this one kind of aligns with my coaching philosophy, which is to have as much knowledge as possible across as many different disciplines as possible, because you never know when you're going to be able to pick the little piece of information out of a different hat that's going to apply to what you're working on. And range really talks about how can you connect ideas from different sort of genres of information to create innovative new ideas for the situation that you're in. So I love that. And Atomic Habits I read last year, which is a really good, just sort of habit change book. And then
That's a great one.
that's a really good one. His Instagram is great. He puts little quotes up on his Instagram that kind of remind you of the different parts of the book. So if you don't follow him on Instagram, James Clear it's a great Instagram to follow. And when I was getting ready for this, I was looking back at my bookshelf, and I'm not shockingly to you, like a little bit OCD about my bookshelf, and I keep my books like sorted in order that I've read them by year. And so I was like deep dove back into far back on the shelf to some stuff that I read a long time ago that I think really holds up. And if you're working on trying to convince people why your program is important, in particular education folks, like if you're trying to convince your administration or school board or anything why it's important to have strength and conditioning, in particular as a class during the day, go back to Spark by John Ratty. Mm-hmm. That is specifically addressing the connection between activity and brain function, and why it's important to have activity in your day and how it can help kids academically. So that's a really good tool to leverage with people outside of the field to help them understand why stuff is important. And then Legacy, which is such a classic. I love that one. And Grit by Angela Duckworth. And if you've watched the TED Talk, you really need to read the book, because the book is really clarifies and gives details about a lot of the stuff in the TED Talk, and I love that one. And she has a free grit inventory on her website that I give to the kids in my class a lot, and I give to my athletes. It's really easy online. I think it's just like 10 or 12 questions. And the language is perfectly great for high school level kids. With my middle school kids, if I give it to them, I kind of walk them through and explain some of it. But otherwise, it's a really easy tool to take a look at, which athletes already are resilient in a way that you're going to be able to push them a little harder, and which kids need a little bit more support relative to developing that resilience and using that information to help decide how you're going to talk to certain kids, I think is really valuable.
What a great tool, Jet, to get to know them a little bit different than the traditional questions and looking at it.
Yeah.
So, oh yes, you always bring it with the life-changing books. So awesome. I want to go ahead.
I know you're a big fan of Lean In, right, by Sheryl Sandberg.
Yep, that's my game changer book.
So here's two more along those same lines. On Becoming Fearless by Arianna Huffington, and then her other book is also called Thrive, and I love both of those because she's a total lady boss and like crushing it and has fascinating things to say.
On Becoming Fearless by who?
Arianna Huffington.
Okay.
Of the Huffington Post.
Yep.
And then her other one is called Thrive. I read On Becoming Fearless first and then read Thrive after, and I thought both of them were awesome. Okay.
Yes, I'm excited to bring on, interviewing female coaches. Is our reading might be a little bit different, in some aspects. So I'm glad you brought up those two books, because, there's something sometimes that has a niche just for us. So wonderful. Well, I want to transition here to you again and your great accomplishments that you have done. You are currently our State Coach of the Year in Minnesota, so I'm very proud that you are representing us, because you really do, you talk about range and all the different parts, and that is part of the process related to earning that award. And you have so many. And I think what has kind of been driving you with the National High School Strength Coaches Association, and how did you get into that and a big part of it?
Yeah, man, it's an unbelievable organization. I floundered for a long time, you know, like I think I first attended a strength and conditioning conference maybe in 2011 or 12. And I just dove in and went to a national conference of a different organization. And I remember walking around that space being, one, shockingly surprised at the number of bald men, and two, just sort of standing there and staring and being like, I have no idea who to talk to. I don't know where to go. I don't know what the best speakers are to go listen to. And so for years, you know, I would go to those things and I would make sure that I hit the one or two things that were specifically tagged as, you know, like high school or whatever. And I very first met Gary Schofield at one of those, which was great. He was speaking and I went and watched him speak, and then happened to bump into him later. He probably doesn't even remember this, but on the shuttle to the airport. And, you know, that was really the very first person I actually was able to connect with, and how lucky that it was him. But for years, you know, you would show up to these things and sort of like pay a bunch of money to go and travel there and do the thing, and then walk away with just a few things that you felt like were relevant. Now, as a science nerd, I loved going and listening to everything, you know, like Brian Mann geek out on like all of his data, and Cal Dietz geeking out on data. Like I can get into that, but I don't feel like it's always super relevant to what I can do here. And when this organization first started in 2016, I remember seeing that announcement and being like, oh, this is so awesome. Like, I'm so excited for this to happen. And from the drop of the hat, I mean, right off the bat, connections like crazy. Like, it was unbelievable to me how quickly that community came together, which just is a reflection of the fact that it was so needed. And right off the bat, you know, it was like the end of November that it started, and, you know, people started rolling in and joining, and, you know, people paying a much lower registration fee for events, people paying a much less registration fee to be a member, and all of that. And the value that we get back is so much more than any other organization can provide to high school coaches. There's just no competition. And, you know, those guys, Gary and Rich and Kevin and Fred, like, good on them for taking the steps, because holy cow, have they changed the lives of a lot of people. And it was the very first time going to those events, was the very first time where I really felt like I was getting my money's worth and actually getting to know people, you know, like they provide a space where you don't have to feel, self-conscious about like your experience level or where you coach or what you know, and you can just walk up to anybody and be like, hey, I'm Jessica. You're much better at this than I am, by the way, which is why we hang together so well, because you're much more extroverted than I am. But you can go up to anybody and just say, hey, where do you coach? What do you do? Like, tell me about yourself. And you will learn something from every single person that you talk to at those events, even if they're coaching at a school that's totally different than yours. Just the fact that there's so many high school coaches in one place, there's just so many great conversations that come out of all of that. And I think that hashtag family that we all use, people might look at that and be like, it's not a real family. And I know, because I've done it, you know, you reach out to people and you say like, hey, can you help me out with this? And within minutes you get tons of people wanting to help you solve whatever problem that you're having. So it's an organization really full of true professionals that I think are in it 100% to improve the field and help the kids, and are really devoted to creating a space where we all have the information that we need to do the best we can for our kids wherever we are.
Yeah, and it's about that. You hit it right there. You know, what can we do for our our athletes. I remember thinking, going to learning about strength and conditioning, and I'm from a smaller school. I seriously thought I was making my job up. Like I did not know another strength and conditioning coach. And I thought, well, we need, somebody that is teaching strength and conditioning and not just supervising the weight room that is another sport coach. I seriously thought I was making my job up. Turns out there's so many more out there, and it just takes away that isolation. I cannot say that enough, especially as a small coach. So,
and I think so many of us work in isolation that for whatever reason, for funding or research, whatever it happens to be, so many of us are here on our own, crushing it every day, and sometimes crossing our fingers that what we're doing is right. And with limited resources and not a lot of connections, especially if you're new, it can be really stressful to be like, oh gosh, I hope I'm not screwing it up, And I just remember being able to go to that first conference and sitting and listening to people talk and say like, this is what I do and this is how it works for me. And I just remember being like, oh good, someone else does it too. Like just the affirmation that you get from being around other people in that organization. And just, I mean, as a female, I think that was really the time when I really started feeling like I was able to add value and take up the value of other folks, because we're really lucky here to have an amazing group of men that coach in Minnesota that are insanely supportive of what we do.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
And Ryan Johnson and Scott Meyer are amazing people that I am so grateful for, because without them, I think I would still be just out there like feeling my way around trying to figure it out. And they really brought us in and made sure that we met the people that we should meet and that we got to be part of the conversations that we should be part of. And that feels really, really good in a space where you're typically by a large margin the minority.
Yes, it really does. And it empowers us. So I've been more empowered, as an older coach than I ever in the last 4 years than I was in the 14 prior. So
yeah, I totally agree.
Been amazing. Well, gosh, so many great things. Just talking about your facility and the great things that you're doing in St. Louis Park. I want to finish with just a few fast 5 questions and get your insight. How about person influenced you the most?
My Mama Linda.
Yeah.
My mom she's been coaching 47 years. She's a Hall of Fame coach here in Minnesota, and she is like in my brain sort of the original lady boss. And I think that I got to watch her coach growing up, and getting to watch her coach and have leadership positions in coaching and stand up for herself in a time that was much harder than we're living in now for females coaching. She's really the one that when I'm struggling, I think about like, what would Linda do? And she's been able to navigate it with a lot more grace than I do most of the time, but she's amazing.
And all these trips that we go on to conferences, it's always fun. She comes at the end of the conference, right? And then you guys have your little vacation after. So
yep.
Great support system. Favorite quote?
So my social studies teacher in high school used to use this quote, and it's the only quote that really ever actually has stuck in my brain, which is, that which does not kill you only makes you stronger.
All right. I love it.
Which is a little harsh, right? But like, it's a good reminder that you can do a lot of stuff without dying.
Yep. I love it. Favorite hobby outside training, which this is the most important thing, I think, is to make sure that you have those outside hobbies. So what do you have?
Yeah, just so much reading and time outside. I love to travel, which, being a coach, traveling is really hard, but I try to make it happen as often as I can. And really spending time with my family. I'm really fortunate to have a lot of my family still close by, so I get to spend time with my grandparents and my parents and everybody around. But gosh, I'm at school so much. It's something I'm working on. I'm working on trying to be better about staying away from school when I don't have to be here.
And I bet people who have watched you on the Coaching Nexus know you got that great pack around you, your your animals.
Yes, my animals frequent my Zoom meetings, which is why I'm here, because they like to like crawl over my head. So I had to come to school to record this, so we didn't have to have any dog intervention while we were recording.
Well, you were recording. This next one might be a little bit different than usually the traditional male coach response, but 15 minutes to train for you.
Kettlebell swings, deadlifts. I default to like avoid upper body training so much. Like I have to force myself to do upper body training. So I'm like, I love to train lower body. I love kettlebell swings. I love deadlifts. I love to play around with variations, like single leg variations, pseudo single leg variations on stuff. So when I do my own training, I experiment a lot. And I'm old and I don't compete in anything. So my training can kind of look like whatever I want it to look like from day to day. So ultimately 15 minutes, whatever sounds good that day.
All right. And you had some great social media of your backpack workouts.
Oh gosh.
And you
yes.
went through and you did them, didn't you?
I did them in my living room with my dogs, and my kids got to watch real life housewives of St. Louis Park. All the drama that happens in my house.
Love it. All right. And this is, I forgot to ask you. This is my first time, guys. So biggest question of this podcast. How are you making it big time where you were at?
Man, I feel like I am on this planet to be here doing this job in this place. I never wanted to coach anywhere else. I had such a great experience here as a student and as an athlete, and I loved it. And I had amazing coaches when I was here, and I love the community. It feels like a small town, and I just want to be able to give back to my kids, my athletes, even a shred of the positive experience that I had here as a student athlete. It's really where my passion's at. And I don't have any desire to coach anywhere else. I never have.
Wow. An amazing legacy you're leaving. And especially with your mom having been there. I mean, oh my gosh, the years that your family has been in that community. Yes, it is. It's big time. It is big time. A fun part, small school coach, making it.
Yeah, I got two for you. Our friend A.G. Giovanetti over at Notre Dame Academy. That's over by Green Bay. Great guy, smaller school, doing good stuff. Check him out on social media. And then I don't know her super well. I've only become acquainted with her on Winning Leader Academy, but a gal by the name of Lindsay Kirschman. She's at Poudre High School in Colorado, and I really have like kind of connected with the stuff that she's saying, because I think her and I are on kind of parallel journeys relative to what we're trying to work through with our students. And she's super passionate about what she's doing, and she's on social media too at Impala Strong. And I'd love to hear more about what she's doing over there, because she's crushing it.
Awesome. Gotta reach out to her. Love it. Well, talk to the listeners. I know contact-wise, you will get back to them and you are my resource as far as anything science-y and trying new stuff out. But how can we contact you? What's the best way to reach you?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at SLP Lift. And our Facebook page is St. Louis Park Strength and Conditioning. You can send me a message in any of those places, or you can email me at gust.jessica@slpschools.org.
Okay. Good. Yes, I can't say it enough. Reach out to her, and if you've been pondering some sort of training, I'm going to give you a guarantee that Jessica's probably tried it, and she's probably looked into it, and she knows who has been doing it well. I cannot say enough. Just, I mean, if you look in the show notes and her certifications behind it, it's too, so long, and it's wonderful. I'm so proud of the things that you've done. I'm so grateful for you in my life, and you did a great job kicking off this first session for me. So ease my nerves, and it was wonderful. So thank you, Jessica.
Thanks for letting me be on.
All right. Well, I was very excited for this first one, and I'm excited to keep bringing you great female coaches on the Big Time Strength podcast. I am your host today, Amanda Berg. Thank you very much.